I'm doing a simple demonstration in how to paint glass. I've already drawn the gesture, and I started with a pastel pencil for the gesture, Carbothello number 645, kind of a sanguine-like color. And I find sometimes it's easier to start with pastel pencil, especially with something that's detailed, as opposed to using paint. Sometimes I'll go either way, but in this case, I like pastel. So let's get started. I'm starting with the gesture, and I'm going to be drawing the apple, and you can see where the apple hits the glass, it misaligns and distorts. Also, the tablecloth stripes, as they hit the glass, will misalign and distort as well. So we have misalignment and distortion in the gesture itself. The next phase, we actually blocking in the painting. This one I'm going to block in grisaille or grayscale. And I'll do that with various warm and cool grays or blacks, putting in a coarse shadow here. And I'm going to block in the background. And I just keep this kind of light and loose in the beginning, not too concerned about things, but I do want to pay attention a little bit to the edges. First I want to get it blocked in. So I always start, when in the block-in phase, I always start with the background and work my way from there. Sometimes I can use that color in various places in the painting. Okay, just getting going. Okay, continuing the background part. I'm going to do this in, eventually I'll be doing this in color. I'll be doing a complementary color scheme. Okay, now I'm beginning to put in some of the stripes of the tablecloth, and you can see it misaligning and distorting as it passes behind the glass. Okay, continuing to block in. Okay, get the apple in here. You can see a little bit of misalignment with that apple. I'm going to put a little more value on the edges so I can see the edges, a little bit lighter. I'll go dark against light or light against dark, depending on the value that I'm painting against. And I'll get some of these distorted shapes that I see in the glass itself. Right now I'm just painting what passes behind or into the glass. And we'll refine the background a little bit more. Okay, now I've got some general value just about everywhere, and I'll be doing a complementary color scheme using blue-green and red-orange throughout most of this painting. Just getting in the background still at this point. Redefining it. Now I'm starting to pay more attention to edges as well. Okay, a couple of quick little strokes there. Now I like to go light against dark and dark against light so that you have enough contrast to see the object. Glass objects can be tricky, especially a clear glass object. Okay, so we got continuing to refine some of the brush strokes, just softening them slightly. This is at hyper speed, obviously. Okay, now I'm putting in a little bit of the edge, and you can see I'm using a brush as a maul stick just to steady my hand. Now we're going to go into the early refinement. You'll have muted values on objects that are passing behind or into the glass. So in this case, the tablecloth and the object itself, or the apple, will have muted values or dulled out values inside the glass area. Okay, I'm refining some edges, getting a little more contrast on the edge itself. In this early phase, I will just keep everything kind of loose in general. As I mentioned, I'm using a complementary color scheme. This will be somewhat of a blue, green, and red-orange color scheme with variations of neutral colors. Okay, muted values inside the glass that I just explained. Okay, now I'm refining the edge a little bit more. I'm getting multiple values on the edge itself. The misalignment inside the glass of the object will not go completely to the outside edge. It'll be going to kind of the inside area that you can see. If it went to the outside, it would make the glass look paper thin. Okay, getting general values in. Everything's just general to begin with. General to specific. General shapes. Got a little bit of color on the apple now. And you can see I'm getting several different values on the edges. Putting in just a little, letting myself know a little reflected light area on the apple. Continuing to refine these stripes. These stripes take a long time. Horizontal stripes. Very tedious. Sometimes I'll use another brush as a maul stick to steady my hand when doing these long stripes. Okay. Now the color inside is going to be similar. Eventually though it will be muted out, calmed, a little bit more subtle and a little duller inside the glass than outside. Outside's going to be much more intense. Putting in a cast shadow. Refining edges as I go. I'll be passing over these stripes several times. I want to try to make it look a little bit textury. It is a tablecloth. Okay, putting in some more reflected light. And just refining my edges. I don't want to soften every single brush stroke. Sometimes it might be just the edge of the stroke, so it'll keep the paint a little more intense. Blending into that core shadow above. And I got violets in that core shadow, red violets. Yeah, that's a little bit on the cool side underneath I have a little more warmth on that cool reflected light than a lot of times than I'll do. I wanted to keep that in there though because I liked the intensity of that light right down there. Okay, and I try to keep my brush strokes going in the direction of the grain of the apple. So that's what I'm doing. Now I'm also putting in a few small highlights, a little smaller than I'll put in later on. Now I'm increasing the intensity of the color itself. And I'm putting highlight area in a little bit more on the apple. And also on the inside portion of the apple, inside the glass. And softening some of my strokes. In this case, I'll soften a lot of times just the edge of a stroke so I can keep a little intensity of color in there. Okay, now I'm putting multiple values on the edge of the glass, so I have more than one value on the edge, and so the misalignment of the apple will butt up against one or two or three of those values. And I'm refining my contrast, my edges, and I'm doing more refinement. I'm actually putting in some small highlights right on the edge of the glass itself. And I'll flare those highlights out. These will be a little bit hard, so they'll be hard on one or two sides, and then they'll flare off in the ends. I'm also putting some reflected color that it is reflecting on the edge of the rim, such as the orange from the apple. And I'm putting a little bit of glare, which is coming off of that highlight, onto the glass itself. And I'll get back to that in just a minute. And I'm going to refine this apple a little bit more here. This one in the front, this apple core, and in the shadow areas, I'm putting in cool colors, basically more of a red violet, so even a tinge of blue violet in there, and yellow greens. Now I'm adding surface glare, and by doing what I'll do is I'll do a lot of horizontal strokes. A lot of times I'll find in an object such as this glass, I'll get a lot of horizontal glares. Glare is basically a reflection of other things around the object reflecting on the glass, and it can also be light itself reflecting on there, creating glare. So when I put the glare in there, it begins to set the background or the apple back into the background and give a surface value to the glass, and it'll start to look more like glass. And I'll refine these edges as well. Now I'm entering the final stage. A lot of times I'll flare off edges of that glare, and I'll begin to put in my highlights, my main highlights. Okay, and I'll still get little glares of light, little hints of light on the glass itself. And you'll see the object, the tablecloth and the apple is beginning to look a little more subdued. It's in the background. On the highlight, I want the viewer to know that this is a hard object, so I'll have some edges of it to be hard. Others might flare out a little bit. And as I flare it out, I'll soften it, and it'll look a little more natural. Okay, I'm getting a highlight on the apple. I'm going to flare off that in all directions a little bit. And I also have highlights that I've got on this apple core in the front. I'll flare off edges of that as well. And continue to refine into the final phase. Final phase is going to be full of tweaking and that type of thing. So here I've refined the edges a little bit more, I've refined the highlights, and I've also refined the glare just a bit more.